Davies is a modern philosopher. He recognises Malcolm's attempt to distinguish between existence and necessity. As Frege pointed out, we can accept existence only as a second-order predicate, but could accept necessity as a first-order predicate. However, Davies goes on to challenge Malcolm in several ways. Davies offers challenges to Anselm's version of the ontological argument. He firstly points out that the comparison Anselm makes of that than which nothing can be conceived existing in the mind, in intellectu, and in reality, in re, is invalid, because there is nothing to compare the existent thing to. Asking which is more perfect, a non-existent thing or an existence thing, is nonsense, and thus invalid as a philosophical argument. According to Davies' view, the second form of the argument is merely a continuation of the first form. It is wrong to pick the element of the argument that is more favourable when it needs to be treated as a whole. In addition, Davies claims that Anselm is not holding that existence is a perfection at all if we read his Latin correctly. However, Davies feels that these are matters of interpretation, and in fact there are more pressing flaws in this argument. Firstly, Davies sees that whilst Malcolm challenges Anselm's treatment of existence as a predicate in the first form, he goes on to treat necessary existence as one in the second form. Whilst Davies allows this to some extent, since clearly this kind of existence is different from the kind of existence that we have, that of contingency, Malcolm's argument still fails. This is because of his use of the term impossible. In Malcolm's argument, he uses the word impossible in two different ways in the same argument without accounting for it. When Malcolm first talks about impossibility, he is expressing the view that if God is in fact the sort of thing that cannot come into existence, then if God does not exist, he cannot in fact exist at all. In the second case, however, impossible is being used to mean unable to be thought of without contradiction, i.e., the opposite of logically necessary. Malcolm moves from the first way of using the term in his premises to the second way in his conclusion. However, what this means is that his conclusion is an assumption rather than a proven argument. This then, according to Davies, is a very poor argument indeed. He moves from God's non-existence is impossible to God's existence is logically necessary without valid reason. Malcolm's argument can be represented as God is necessary, therefore God is. Davies illustrates this point. A pixie is a little man with pointed ears. There is such a thing as a pixie. If one were to claim that the pixie must exist in order to have those pointed ears, one would surely find the reasoning unacceptable. Davies states that the word is can be used in two different ways. The first is an is of definition. The second is an is of affirmative predication. The first use says nothing about existence. In this case, it says nothing about an existent queen. The statement, however, does explain what the word queen means. The second use, on the other hand, whilst also saying nothing about existence, is not defining anything either. It is saying that there is a vampire, and by this statement implicitly supposing its existence. Malcolm uses the word is in both ways in his argument, without accounting for his move between the two uses. Malcolm moves from the premise as a definition to the conclusion, and is of affirmative predication, without reason, and this is an invalid use of logic. It would be easy to convince someone with this argument, because having agreed on the definition of God, it seems self-contradictory to say that God both is and is not necessarily existent. However, it is quite different defining a subject and then accepting that the subject has a reality. Davies also challenges Plantinga. For Davies, all we can conclude from Plantinga's evidence is that maximal excellence is possible, and therefore God is possible, not actual. We may deny the possibility of there being a being with maximal excellence. We can challenge the definition, and even if we do accept that such a being is possible, it doesn't have to mean that there actually is such a being.